There's another book called the Mahabharata, if I'm saying it correctly, and it's the epic tale. And part of that is, the story of Krishna and Arjuna, which goes into the Bhagavad Gita, which is just, the song of God. It's Krishna, giving Arjuna a pep talk on, yeah, you should kill these people. And here's why. It is your dharma. It is your duty. Well, right, this epic tale, right, talks about the whole battle and the whole situation. And it's the Kauravas versus the Pandavas, right? These two groups of people who are, were cousins, or, they were related to each other. And the Pandavas were in power at that time. And through deception and manipulation, out of jealousy, envy, the other family members were able to take control. They were able to trick the Pandavas into gambling away their kingdom. And they took control. And the whole story is this 18-day war that happens between the two of them. And you can look at it as an epic tale of the soul, right? The unconscious soul seeking unconsciously, its own enlightenment, its own awakening. And the Pandavas are the side of the Dharma. They fight for the Dharma, for the truth. And the Kauravas, they might not be all bad people, but they're ultimately on the wrong side, you could say. The side that goes against the Dharma. And so the right thing is not to follow your emotional inclinations. This is my family. I shouldn't kill them. Let them kill me. No, your duty is to uphold the Dharma. No one can kill anyone. That is only something divine can do. And even then, the soul, the Atman, it continues, it lives. You cannot burn it by fire, cut it by sword, wet it by water. It is untouched by whatever you do in the physical, even the mental. It is perfect, pristine, and always lives within that ocean of pure consciousness. You cannot have any influence over it. And the decision for that soul to separate from the illusion of the body, of the individual, is not something that's in your power. That's in God's authority and God's power. But you still must play your duty, your role perfectly in sustaining and upholding the divine truths, the divine principles and fundamentals. Because when you do that, you call forth this divine power. You are now a resource for that divine light in this world. You are establishing that divine truth. And in doing so, you are bringing this grace into this world and affecting the lives of all the others around you. It is not just about personal gain. It is about what is righteous and full of justice. It's not a tale for a pacifist. It's a tale of a dharmic warrior, which is another thing that society has gotten wrong so many times, is that the spiritual path is a path of solely pacifism. And while that might be part of it, that's not all of it. That sometimes it's about fighting, a battle, a war, sometimes even literally, for the sake of upholding that Dharma. That is how important that Dharma is, that whatever it requires to uphold it, it must be followed as perfectly as possible. And so in this story, there's a story in which one of these, people, this man from the other side, who was considered a legendary warrior, who was like invincible, very difficult to beat, and the Pandavas had to battle him, they had to fight him, and he was nearly invincible, except his one weakness was his attachment to his son. And they knew that if they could use his attachment to his son, they could possibly trick him into thinking that his son had died. And in thinking his son had died, this man would lose hope. And he could be easily defeated then. And so Krishna, the highest embodiment of the Dharma, had told the Pandavas, he said, you have to convince him that his son has died. It sounds like a story of deception. But if you look at the vital truth behind it, if it's about upholding the Dharma, right, it is not about suppressing the truth, but rather how to appropriately express that truth. And so the tale goes that what he ended up doing is he convinced one of the, the brothers of the Pandavas, his name was Bhima. He convinced him, he told him, devised this plan where they were going to name an elephant after that man's son. And then they would behead the elephant. They would kill the elephant and then declare, your son has died, using his name without actually referencing his son. They would say, I think his name was Ashwatthama. They say, Ashwatthama's dead. And very quietly say, the elephant. But enough so that he would not hear them say the elephant. Because one of the brothers, his name was Yudhishthira, and he was, very honest man. And he was a little uncomfortable with lying to the man, lying to, this warrior and saying your son has died. So they found a way for him to still tell the truth, but the expression of that truth was enough to uphold the Dharma still. So Bhima killed the elephant. He said, Ashwatthama is dead. And the warrior said, what? And he didn't believe him initially. So he went to this other man, this man that he knew would speak the truth. And he said, Ashwatthama is dead, the elephant. And he was so devastated, so caught up in his emotions, and he didn't hear the quiet voice saying the elephant, that he fell down, he relinquished his sword, and they beheaded him. And it was a vital turning point in the battle. And then the story continues to go on. Obviously, the Pandavas, they regain control, they win the battle, the Dharma is upheld. And then the story, right, this is the full story, not just the story between the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, but the story goes that the Pandavas, these brothers, right, now it's come to a point in which, it's the end of their reign over the kingdom, and now they're on a quest for moksha. And so they, begin traveling to the Himalayas. I think it's all 5 brothers. And during their travels, seeking heaven, eventually these brothers fall off one by one. Even Arjuna. Each one of them, dies on the path to heaven. And they die for different reasons. One of them, died because they, loved one of the brothers more than the others. One of them died because they, were full of pride. Another one dies because they were full of gluttony. One of them thought, Arjuna thought that, nothing could defeat him, that he was, invincible, all powerful, kind of little prideful there. And that's what caused his defeat in the end. All of them, just different qualities of the ego, really. But what the story is symbolic of is that each one of the brothers, or each one of the siblings, is a different layer of the ego that's shed on the way to moksha. Pride, gluttony, fear, So all that's left is the final, honest brother, Yudhishthira, sorry. And on his path, as all the brothers are walking initially, a dog joins them. And the dog continues with them all the way, up the Himalayas. And when it's just him left, Yudhishthira, he finally meets Indra, the god, the king of the gods, at the doors of moksha, the doors of heaven. And he says, you did it. You made it. You have attained. You are welcome to heaven in your living form. You don't have to die to go to heaven. It's like you can live and be in heaven now. He's like, all of your brothers, all your siblings, they had to die to reach moksha, but you are the one that made it while alive in this body. And you can be the first living being to enter heaven. He says, on one condition, you can't bring the dog with you. And him seeing this and realizing he couldn't bring the dog with him, he was like, but this dog has been loyal to me. This dog has trusted me and followed me all along this path. We've been a team. We've worked together. He's like, I will not go to a heaven that will not allow me, that will cause me to be disloyal to someone who has been so loyal to me in return. So in the face of losing his chances of heaven, he says no. And in the moment he says no, that he can't betray this dog, this being that has been so loyal and followed him to the very ends of the earth, immediately that dog transforms and turns into the god of Dharma. And they declared this was your final test. To enter into moksha, to enter into heaven, was to see if you would uphold the Dharma, if the Dharma was more important to you than heaven itself. And he succeeded. He was victor over that final trial. And so he goes into heaven, and immediately when he goes into heaven, he sees one of the warriors from the opposite party, on a throne there, enjoying the bliss and ecstasy of heaven, someone who is following adharmic principles, going against the Dharma, fighting on the unrighteous side of the battle. And he saw that, and he didn't see any of his siblings there. All of these men who fought and strived to uphold the Dharma, to uphold justice and righteousness and truth, who made sacrifices emotionally, mentally, physically in order to uphold the truth. And he saw instead this man was there on the throne. And he said, why is he here? Where are my brothers? Where are my siblings? And Indra told him, oh, they're in hell. And he's like, what? They're in hell? But I made it to heaven, but my brothers, my siblings are in hell who fought this battle for truth and justice? And even though he had a chance to enjoy that bliss of heaven, that ecstasy, he said, no, show me my brothers. Prove to me they're in hell. I don't believe you. And so he took him down. I said, bring me to hell. And he showed him hell and showed his brothers there suffering and pain and agony. And he said, let me stay here with them. He denied heaven, that bliss and that ecstasy, to stay with his companions in Dharma. Because in his mind, he could not live in a heaven that did not uphold those divine principles. Even heaven itself, even the bliss, the ecstasy of that personal enlightenment, that personal gain, that final desire, he could not live that. He said, I will deny heaven if the Dharma is not there. I will sacrifice even that for the Dharma. And upon that decision, the illusion of hell disappeared. And he found that, that man who was on the throne, he disappeared as well. And instead he saw all of his brothers, all of his siblings there with him, enjoying heaven. It was just another illusion, another trial.